Beneath the calm, tropical waters of the Pacific lies a place that very few humans have ever seen. A world so dark, cold, and crushing that for centuries it was thought life could not exist there at all. At such depths, bones should dissolve, cells should collapse, and yet, against all odds, life still thrives. This is the Mariana Trench. It's the deepest frontier on our planet. The story begins in the 1870s, when the HMS Challenger set out to map the ocean floor. For years, scientists believed the seafloor was relatively flat, lying about 3 or 4 kilometers beneath the waves. But as the crew lowered weighted ropes east of the Philippines, they were stunned to find the line sinking far deeper than expected. At more than 8 kilometers. The rope finally touched bottom. Without realizing it, they had discovered the deepest place on Earth. Today we know that at its lowest point, called the Challenger Deep, the trench reaches nearly 11 kilometers below sea level. If Mount Everest were dropped into it, the mountain's peak would still be hidden under 2 kilometers of water. The trench itself stretches for 2,500 kilometers in a long scar across the Pacific, up to 70 kilometers wide. But why is it there at all? To answer that, we need to understand how the Earth works beneath our feet. The crust of our planet is broken into giant slabs called tectonic plates floating on molten rock. In the Atlantic Ocean, these plates slowly drift apart, creating new seafloor. In the Pacific, however, the opposite happens. The oceanic crust collides with the edges of lighter continental plates. Unable to rise, it is forced down into the Earth's mantle in a process known as subduction. The Mariana Trench is one of these boundaries, marking where the Pacific plate sinks beneath the Philippine plate. It is part of Earth's recycling system, creating earthquakes, feeding volcanoes, and pulling the seafloor into the depths. What would it be like to descend into this abyss? At the surface, the ocean appears calm and blue. In the first 200 meters, sunlight fuels an explosion of life. Tiny plankton here produce half the world's oxygen, feeding fish, jellyfish, and even great whales. But as you sink below, the light begins to fade. Between 200 and 1,000 meters lies the twilight zone. Sunlight weakens, colors vanish, and the water grows colder. Here, countless creatures survive by glowing in the darkness. Bioluminescent fish and jellyfish flicker like living stars, using light to hunt, to hide, or to attract mates. Scientists believe this layer of the ocean may contain more fish by weight than all the rest of the seas combined. Beyond a kilometer down, the world turns pitch black. This is the midnight zone, the largest habitat on Earth. Temperatures hover near freezing, and the pressure is hundreds of times greater than at the surface. Creatures here have evolved in strange ways. The barrel-eye fish has a transparent head, allowing it to see upward through the gloom. Anglerfish dangle glowing lures to draw in prey. Bristlemoths, tiny but countless, may be the most abundant vertebrate on the planet, and still, the trench goes deeper. Past 6 kilometers we enter the Hadal Zone, a realm so hostile that only a handful of lifeforms can endure it. Less than 1% of food from the surface ever makes it this far. The few survivors feed on chemical energy from vents in the seafloor, on scraps of organic matter, and occasionally on the rare carcass of a whale that sinks into the darkness. Yet here giant amphipods crawl across the silt, sea pigs roam in. Herds, snailfish, swim where pressure would crush a submarine. And strange single-celled organisms grow as large as a football. To understand how extreme these conditions are, imagine a ton of weight pressing down on your thumbnail. That is the pressure at the bottom of the trench, over 1,000 times what we feel at sea level. Even machines designed for the task are often destroyed. In 2014, the robotic submersible Nereus was crushed in an instant at nearly 10 kilometers depth. For humans, reaching the bottom was once thought impossible. But in 1960, Don Walsh and Jacques Piccard attempted the unimaginable. In a deep-sea craft called the Trieste, they descended for nearly 5 hours into the darkness. At 9 kilometers down, one of the windows cracked under the stress, but they pressed on. Finally, they reached the bottom. Looking out into the silt, they were astonished to see movement, see cucumber, proof that even here, life had found a way. After just 20 minutes, they began the long ascent. No one returned for more than 50 years. In that time, thousands climbed Mount Everest, and a dozen men walked on the moon. Yet the trench remained untouched, as if it belonged to another world. Then, in 2012, filmmaker James Cameron made the first solo dive to the Challenger deep in a submersible called the Deep Sea Challenger. He returned with high-definition footage of the alien world. Since then, only a small handful of scientists and explorers have followed. Even today, fewer than 30 people have ever reached the deepest point of the ocean far. Fewer than those who have traveled into space. The creatures that inhabit the area may hold secrets we are only just beginning to understand. They're unique. Adaptations to pressure, cold, and darkness could one day help us unlock new medicines, prove technology, or even inspire ways to survive in space. But the trench is not just a cradle of life. It is also a graveyard. Currents carry plastic, waste, and toxic chemicals down into its depths. Scientists have even found traces of industrial pollution inside the bodies of amphipods from the trench. It is a sobering reminder that even the most remote parts of our planet are not safe from human impact. The Mariana Trench is a place of extremes of crushing pressure, eternal darkness, and unimaginable mysteries. It reminds us that, despite our technology and exploration, vast parts of the Earth remain unknown. We often look to the stars for wonder and discovery. But perhaps the greatest alien world lies right here, beneath the waves.